What if the most powerful prayer you'll ever hear isn't just words, but a direct message from God to your soul? What if you've been walking through life thinking you're forgotten, when in fact, the Creator of the universe knows you by name? And what if the very thing you're longing for, peace, strength, purpose, is already within reach through one sacred promise in Isaiah 43? Isaiah 43 isn't just a chapter in the Bible, it's a divine declaration, straight from the heart of God. These words carry the weight of heaven itself. I have called you by name. You are mine. Just let that sink in. That's not a suggestion. That's not symbolic. That is a powerful proclamation from the Almighty, the truth meant to anchor your soul in every season of life. Think about it, the same God who created the heavens, formed the seas, and scattered the stars across the skies, knows your name. He didn't just launch creation and leave you behind to figure things out. No, He walks with you. He longs for you to know that beyond the chaos of this world, beyond the battles you're fighting, His presence is constant and unshakable. Yet, so many today are chasing what won't satisfy: success, relationships, approval. But none of it fills the void. True peace can't be found in things, it's found in a person. Without the presence of God, life feels empty no matter what you achieve. And here's what the enemy doesn't want you to remember: you were created for Him. So, he whispers lies that you're not enough, that God is distant. But Isaiah 43 shuts those lies down with divine certainty. Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name. You are mine. Do you live like that's true? Do you walk like someone who knows the presence of God goes before you? Or are you still wondering if He sees you? Because once you truly believe He's with you, everything changes. Fear loses its grip. Confusion fades. And you begin to live, not just survive, as a redeemed child of the Most High God. So what does it really look like to live in that kind of unshakable confidence? Let's keep going, because what comes next will show you exactly how to walk boldly in His presence. Have you ever wondered what would happen if you truly lived like God was with you, not just in theory, but in every moment? Because Isaiah 43 isn't only speaking about theology, it's confronting our reality. This chapter is a call to shift from head knowledge to heart conviction, to stop hearing about God's promises and start believing them. And when you do, it changes everything. Think of Moses. When God called him to lead Israel, Moses didn't beg for more miracles, more signs, or more strength. He asked for one thing only: if your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here. Why? Because Moses understood what we often forget: without God's presence, nothing else matters. Not success. Not safety. Not recognition. Without Him, we're just wandering. That's exactly what Isaiah 43 is telling us. It's not about the absence of hardship. It's about the assurance of His presence in the hardship. You may walk through fire. You may feel overwhelmed by floodwaters. But you will not be consumed. Let that sink in. The presence of God is not a poetic metaphor. It's a shield, a refuge, a force that breaks fear and silences anxiety. His presence doesn't mean you'll avoid challenges. It means you'll never face them alone. So the question is no longer will God show up. The real question is, will you step into what He's already promised? You don't have to chase God down. You don't have to earn what's already been given. Isaiah 43 declares a powerful truth. He has already called you by name. You already belong to Him. But are you living like you believe that? So many of us walk in defeat and fear and doubt, like we're orphans trying to survive the storm. But we are sons and daughters of the Most High God, redeemed and restored, not to barely get by, but to walk with boldness. Here's the truth. The presence of God changes the atmosphere. When you carry His presence, fear loses its voice, shame loses its weight, and lies lose their power. You're no longer defined by your past. You're defined by who walks with you. The enemy is relentless. He will try to convince you that you're too broken, too far gone, too flawed to be used. But Isaiah 43 confronts that lie with a fierce love. Fear not, for I have redeemed you. Not because you got it all together. Not because you earned it. But because He chose you. And when God calls something redeemed, it's no longer up for debate. So now, the invitation is clear. Are you ready to stop surviving and start walking like someone who carries the presence of the living God? Because what comes next will shake off every chain of fear and lead you into a bold, redeemed identity rooted in God's unshakable love. In the next part, we'll look at what happens when fear meets God's authority and why your past can no longer define your future. But here's the honest truth. Many people hear you are redeemed and nod their heads, but deep down, they don't really believe it applies to them. Why? Because shame still lingers. Guilt still whispers. The past still plays like a broken record in the background of their minds. Maybe that's you. Maybe you've been carrying regret for years, for decisions you made, for things you wish you could undo. You've told yourself, God could never fully forgive this, or worse, I'll never be the same again. But Isaiah 43 stops that thinking right in its tracks. It doesn't say fear not, unless you've gone too far. It doesn't say you are mine, but only if you're perfect. No, it boldly declares fear not, for I have redeemed you. There's no asterisk, no exception, no footnote. God's redemption is total. His love doesn't come with expiration dates. He doesn't rescue you halfway and leave you to clean up the mess on your own. He doesn't redeem you in word and abandon you in practice. He makes you new completely. This is where so many get stuck. They want to earn back God's favor. They try to fix themselves before coming to Him. But Isaiah 43 reminds us that redemption is God's work, not ours. You don't have to prove your worth. You don't have to be your own savior. You don't have to keep dragging yesterday's weight into tomorrow. When God redeems, He also restores. He gives you a new identity, not defined by what broke you, but by the one who put you back together. That's why fear starts to lose its grip the moment you believe this truth. Your value comes from the one who called you His. Not from your past. Not from people's approval. Not from performance. Can you imagine walking through life, no longer trying to measure up, but simply walking in the freedom of being already chosen? That kind of freedom silences fear. That kind of assurance ignites boldness. And that kind of identity rooted in divine redemption is unshakable. So let me ask you, are you still letting your past define your worth? Or are you ready to let God's redemption rewrite your story? Why? Because when you do, everything changes. And now, as we move forward, you'll discover why even your most painful moments were never meant to define you. They were meant to reveal who's walking beside you in the fire. Sometimes we ask the wrong question. Instead of saying, God, why am I going through this? Maybe we need to ask, Lord, what are you trying to show me in this? Isaiah 43 isn't just a comforting passage, it's a call to perspective. It's a reminder that every fire you walk through, every wave that crashes against your soul, is not proof of God's absence. It's the setting for His presence to be made known more deeply than ever before. The enemy wants to convince you that the fire is punishment, that the floodwaters are the end of your story, that struggle means you've failed. But Isaiah 43 flips that narrative. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. God never said you wouldn't go through trials. He promised you wouldn't go through them alone. What if the battle you're fighting isn't really about your circumstances, but about your identity? One of the most dangerous strategies of the enemy is not to destroy you physically. It's to make you forget who you are and whose you are. You see, we live in a world obsessed with labels. Every day, you're told who you are by the media, by social feeds, by people who don't even truly know you. You're measured by your appearance, your performance, your past, or even your pain, and over time, those voices start to stick. You begin to wear names you were never meant to carry, not good enough, broken beyond repair, too far gone, and worthy. But Isaiah 43 breaks that cycle with a divine interruption. God says, I have called you by name, you are mine. That's not symbolic. That's not motivational fluff. That's a heavenly decree, and when God declares something, it overrides every lie spoken over your life. You were not created to live in the shadows of people's opinions. You weren't designed to find your worth in titles, trends, or temporary approval. You are not your mistakes. You are not your trauma. You are not your history. You are His. Let that truth thunder through your spirit. Let it silence every whisper of shame. Let it wash away the weight of striving and insecurity. Because when God calls you by name, He isn't just claiming the polished version of you, the version that has it all together. He's calling the real you, the bruised, the burdened, the battling. He says, you are mine, not after you've fixed yourself, but while you're still in process. His love reaches you where you are, not just where you think you should be. His voice cuts through every other voice trying to define you. His claim on your life is permanent, unshakable, and not up for negotiation. Yet the enemy will do anything to make you forget this. He'll plant seeds of insecurity. He'll replay your failures on loop. He'll use people to speak words that tear down rather than build up. And if he can't make you walk away from God, he'll try to make you question your place in His plan. But listen, you were not called by your failure. You were not called by your shame. You were not called by your sin. You were called by name, by the one who formed you, redeemed you, and still sees purpose in your life even when you don't. That's why you don't need to strive for identity. You can rest in it. You don't need to perform to earn God's love. He already set His love on you before you even knew His name. And when you know who you belong to, you begin to live differently. You stop shrinking to fit people's expectations. You stop apologizing for your calling. You stop carrying the weight of past mistakes like a name tag. You walk with boldness. Not arrogance, boldness, a holy confidence rooted in the truth that your identity is sealed in the voice of the one who says, you are mine. Now think about that. What would your life look like if you fully embraced that identity? What would shift if you stopped searching for external validation and started anchoring yourself in what God has already spoken? The world will try to rename you, but God never changes His mind. His word over you is eternal. His claim on you is eternal. And His presence with you, that's eternal to. And now, as we move forward, you'll discover how Isaiah 43 not only redefines who you are, but teaches you how to live free from the lies that have tried to limit you. In fact, some of the greatest revelations of God's power don't come on mountaintops. They come in the valley, in the heat of the furnace, in the storm that rages when the night is longest. Let's pause and remember the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They didn't see God's deliverance before the fire, they met Him in it. And when King Nebuchadnezzar looked into the flames, what did he see? Not 3, but 4, the 4th being like the Son of God, walking with them. Not only did they survive, they came out without even the smell of smoke on them. That's what happens when God walks through the fire with you. That's what Isaiah 43 is all about, divine presence in impossible places. God doesn't always take the fire away, but He promises it won't consume you. He doesn't always calm the storm before it hits, but He anchors you through it. And He often allows the wilderness not to destroy you, but to refine you, to strip away every false foundation so that you learn to stand on His word alone. Too many people believe that struggle is a sign they've done something wrong. But sometimes, it's the very evidence that God is doing something right, something deep, something eternal, something that cannot be shaken. You see, fire doesn't only burn. Fire also purifies. It reveals what was hidden. It melts away what doesn't belong. It prepares what will last. And maybe that's what God is doing in your life right now. Maybe the pressure you feel is not there to crush you. Maybe it's there to press you into deeper dependence. Maybe the unanswered questions are the space where trust is being stretched. Maybe the silence is the soul where your faith will finally grow strong roots. Don't quit in the middle of the storm. Don't surrender halfway through the fire. Don't turn back just because you're tired of waiting. Because if you stop now, you might miss what's on the other side. Not just survival, but transformation. Not just rescue, but renewal. And when you do come through it, and you won't come out the same. You'll come out stronger. Wiser. More rooted in the reality of God's unshakable presence. You'll walk not in fear of the fire, but in the testimony of having passed through it and touched. So let me ask you, and I mean this from the deepest place of encouragement, what is God refining in you? Through this fire, what if the storm you're in is actually preparing you for something greater than you ever imagined? What if your current season is not the end, but the turning point? Because if Isaiah 43 teaches us anything, it's this: you are not alone, and the God who called you by name is still with you, even in the fire, even in the flood, even in the waiting. And as we continue, we'll discover how that same presence, that same promise, speaks directly to your identity, your value, and your future, even when the world tries to tell you otherwise. There is a powerful shift that happens in your life when you stop trying to earn your place and start living from the truth that you already belong. Isaiah 43 doesn't speak to a hypothetical person, to someone distant or qualified by perfection. It speaks to the weary, the overwhelmed, the ones standing in the rubble of their past trying to make sense of their identity. That is why the Lord doesn't begin his message with an invitation to perform, but with a declaration of relationship. You are mine. And when God says that, he is not merely making a claim, he is establishing a covenant, an unbreakable bond not rooted in your worthiness, but in his faithfulness. For too often, we live in the tension between who God says we are and who we fear we might still be. We carry the weight of old labels, we measure our progress by the wrong standards, and we quietly compare our journey to those who seem further along. But the words of Isaiah 43 were not written to the perfect. They were written to a people who had been through exile, failure, and judgment. A people who had every reason to believe that they had disqualified themselves from divine favor. And yet, God meets them not with condemnation, but with comfort. He doesn't list their failures. He reminds them of his promise. He doesn't rehearse their history. He reaffirms their identity. This is the radical mercy of God, that he calls us by name in the very places where we feel nameless. He reminds us of his presence in the seasons when we feel abandoned. He speaks value over us in moments when all we see is what we've lost. And perhaps this is the deeper invitation of Isaiah 43, not just to believe in God generally, but to trust that he is personally, presently, passionately involved in your life, and he is not leaving. It's easy to talk about trusting God when life is smooth, when prayers are answered quickly, when the path is lit and the next step is obvious. But what about the seasons when God is silent? What about the days when you're doing your best to stay faithful, and yet nothing seems to move? Isaiah 43 was written for that kind of moment, the wilderness season, the dry season, the God, are you still with me, season. And into that silence, God speaks with unwavering clarity: fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name. You are mine. These words are not merely to be read, they are to be carried. They are to become the lens through which you see everything, your circumstances, your struggle, your calling, and your future. Because once you begin to live as someone who is fully redeemed, you stop striving to prove yourself, You no longer spend your days wondering if you've done enough to deserve God's love. You begin to walk in the peace that comes from knowing you are already accepted, already covered, already chosen. And with that revelation, something in you begins to rise. The fears that used to define you begin to lose their grip. The shame that once held you back starts to crumble under the weight of God's grace. You begin to live not as a person looking for a place to belong, but as someone who walks confidently in the presence of the one who has already made space for you. So the challenge of Isaiah 43 is not just to read the promise, but to respond to it. Will you live as someone who has been redeemed? Will you allow the truth of God's unwavering love to uproot the lies you've believed for too long? Will you dare to believe that His presence is not conditional, but constant and not based on your performance, but anchored in His promise? Because if you do, then your life begins to reflect a deeper truth, not just that God is real, but that He is near. He is present, and He is not done writing your story. And as we move forward, the message will only go deeper, because what's ahead is not just a reminder of who God is, but a revelation of how His presence becomes your strength in the storms to come. There comes a time in every believer's journey when the promises of God are no longer just something to admire from a distance, but something you must actively stand on when everything around you begins to shake. Isaiah 43 was not written for a people standing on the mountaintop. It was written for those walking through valleys, for those who had known defeat and shame, and who were now being called not just to remember God, but to rediscover His presence in the midst of their struggle. What makes this passage so extraordinary is not just the beauty of its language, but the depth of its compassion. God doesn't just say, "I will help you." He says, "I am with you." There's a world of difference between distant help and intimate presence. One watches from afar, the other steps into your reality. Isaiah 43 assures us that God doesn't issue instructions from a distance. He enters into the depths of our reality and walks alongside us. That means when you're walking through seasons of pain or uncertainty, God is not watching you from the outside. He's right there in the middle of it. His presence is not symbolic, it's sustaining. It's not a poetic concept, it's a daily lifeline, holding you when you feel like falling, whispering peace when the world is loud with anxiety, reminding you that even when everything else feels unstable, He is not shaken. Too often, we associate God's presence with comfort and ease. But Isaiah 43 redefines the equation. It teaches us that God's presence is most powerful in the fire, most evident in the flood, most real in the moment when we feel we've come to the end of ourselves. And perhaps that's exactly where God wants to meet you, not in your strength, but in your surrender. Because it is only when we come to the end of our own ability that we truly discover what it means to rely on His. It is only when our strategies fail, our confidence crumbles, and our illusions of control collapse that the words "you are mine" start to sound like an anchor instead of an idea. And it's in those moments, those raw, vulnerable, and certain moments, that Isaiah 43 becomes more than a passage. It becomes a lifeline, a shield, a mirror reflecting who you really are in God's eyes. You are not the brokenness you've endured. You are not the silence you've survived. You are not the failures that once tried to bury you. You are His. And if you are His, then your story is not over. No matter how far you've wandered, no matter how tired you've become, no matter how deep the wounds or how long the wait, His presence still finds you. His Spirit still surrounds you. His word still holds true. When God says, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you," He's not describing a hopeful thought, He's making an eternal covenant. That means the flood doesn't drown you, it deepens your faith. The fire doesn't destroy you, it refines your calling. And even the silence becomes sacred when you realize it's not a sign of abandonment, but an invitation to listen more closely. So don't measure God's nearness by how easy your life feels right now. Don't assume that the presence of struggle means the absence of God. The truth of Isaiah 43 declares otherwise. It tells us that we are not alone, not forgotten, not abandoned. We are named, we are redeemed, and we are held by a presence that does not waver with the wind. What if you started walking like that truth was already yours? What if your prayer life reflected that kind of confidence? What if your faith stopped depending on outcomes and started depending on the one who walks with you no matter the outcome? That is the heart of Isaiah 43. That is the kind of prayer this chapter births, not a prayer of panic, but a prayer of presence-fueled courage, a prayer that says, Lord, I don't need to escape the storm, I just need to know you're in the boat with me. And as we turn the page, the message becomes even more personal because next, we will see how God speaks directly to your future, your purpose, and the unshakable destiny He has already prepared for you. As we come to the close of this message, let us not simply admire the words of Isaiah 43 from a distance, as if they were ancient poetry penned for another people, in another time. These words, fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name. You are mine, are alive. They are personal. They are for you, right here, right now. And maybe you needed to hear them more than you realized. Maybe this wasn't just another sermon. Maybe this was a divine interruption, a reminder sent directly to your weary heart that God sees you, knows you, and hasn't changed His mind about you. You may feel like you've been walking through fire. You may be standing in floodwaters that seem like they're rising faster than you can swim. But the promise remains, you will not be consumed. You will not be overtaken. You will not walk alone. You were never meant to live life at the mercy of fear, regret, shame, or striving. You were created for more, for communion, for confidence, for calling. And Isaiah 43 invites you back into that truth. Not a truth you have to earn, but one you can finally begin to rest in. This is not just about surviving hardship. It's about learning how to walk through hardship with your head held high, because you carry something greater than the weight of your circumstances. You carry the presence of the living God. And His presence is not passive. It's powerful. It fights for you. It covers you. It restores you. It strengthens you in the moments when your strength is gone. It lifts you from the ruins of your past and sets your feet on a new path. And no matter what lies you've believed about your worth, your identity, your future, Isaiah 43 speaks a better word. You are not forgotten. You are not too far gone. You are not too broken to be made whole again. You are named. You are redeemed. You are His. So, carry this truth with you. Let it shape the way you speak, the way you pray, the way you respond to fear, the way you treat others, and perhaps most importantly, the way you see yourself. Because when you believe what God says about you, the world loses its power to define you. This is your invitation to begin again, not in your own strength, but in the strength of the one who calls you by name. Let this message become more than encouragement. Let it become transformation. Let it ignite a fire in you that the enemy cannot quench, that trials cannot dim, that fear cannot steal. And remember, God does not dwell in distant places. He dwells with you. Walk boldly, walk freely, walk fully, because the presence of God goes before you. This is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of something unshakable.